Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. This is the June 21st, 2021 meeting of the Solar Task Force. I'd like to call this meeting to order and begin by calling the roll. My name is Dr. Michael Kane, and we'll begin with Jeff Shaw.
Present.
Mike Thompson.
Present.
Bonnie Kellenberger does not appear to be here, and Brian Thomas Sr. is also not here as of yet. We have a quorum today, so we will begin. We also have joining us Les Knapp, our consultant, who has assisted us in developing both recommendations and all the final report that you all have in front of you, right? So everyone has a final report in front of you. Before we begin today, our meeting, I'd just like to make a motion to approve it was several weeks ago now, the June 7th meeting. If you take a look at those minutes, just a second. What was here? I think these are simple. I move that we approve these minutes as is.
Second.
Without objection, aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Thank you. So we have old business that is now our current business, and that's really the final St. Mary's County Solar Task Force report. Les Knapp has delivered that report to us. This week, we've been, I note for everyone's situational knowledge, I noted that a lot of task force members contributed to this report, not only, of course, in the development of it, but also recently assisting with the final thoughts on this. And so you have before you this final report. I've made a few changes to what I think are stylistic changes, and if it's possible to go through those, I'd recommend that we go through those. And then I'd also invite Les Knapp to go through certainly the several of the maps that he inserted since the draft last time, as a chance to just talk about those a bit. I know we're all familiar with them, but it'd be good to be sure that I didn't get a chance to review them at all, but it'd be good to talk about them. I'd invite you, Mr. Knight, also to, I know you've assisted with that, and so if you want to add anything to that, you'll be welcome to do that. Of course, task force members are welcome to make any kind of comments. So I have no agenda in terms of how to go through this report. I know you all received it earlier, and I would suggest that you take a look at it if there's any concerns you have, to raise those concerns right away, or recommendations. So I would, and maybe that is really the best place to start, is to make sure, are there any recommendations or suggestions that the task force has that we need to sort of address immediately?
I don't have any.
Thank you.
No.
None. Okay. So with that, I would suggest then that we go through some of the what I think are stylistic changes in the report that I provided. They're in reds, Sandy and Harry, and you'll see them come up on the screen and your screens in just a second. And there you see a little, you see on the side, let's see if I can say it, while this case gives the PSC the final say on siting energy generation facilities that need a CPCN, The consultant believes the holding does not eliminate the important role of local zoning in the CPCN process. Not sure what I changed there.
So I think what you did was, in the text of the report that was submitted today, I had written "does give."
Yes, I
changed that just to "gives," which
Yes.
is certainly just a stylistic
Yes.
correction.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for that clarification. Then below, you see, this was a bit of a change, so I'll look at this, and maybe the easiest way to do this then is for me to also read the existing one. What page is this on,
Page
Harry?
10.
Page 10. Thank you. So I believe it was the second sentence. Well, let's see. Well, I'll read the whole paragraph. While this case does, that's what gives, that was, then a local government may still challenge a PSC decision by alleging the PSC did not follow its own process or violated other statutory or regulatory requirements that remain the same. However, the consultant believes that a county that lacks rationale and clear land use and zoning policies for utility-scale solar development that produces viable project sites increases the risk of preemption by the PSC. And I made what I think is a stylistic change. The consultant also believes that rational and clear land use and zoning policies for utility-scale solar development that produces viable project site decreases the risk of preemption by the PSC. It was a stylistic change and no, I think, formal, not much change in meaning. Would you agree with that? Thank you.
Then we move to page 14.
Thank you. The task force believes that the Conservancy report provides useful information and criteria to help determine the areas available for all kinds of solar development in the county, including preferred areas for utility-scale projects. I just changed the phrase to help determine areas available for different types of solar development in the county. Again, I think a stylistic change here and not a substantive change to the report. And then I think we have page 15. One challenge, I added a sentence here, the last sentence that appears here. I made a change, and this was on the solar setback requirements. It reads, one challenge to the adoption, let's see if I can get this, of residential accessory use solar is rooftop setback requirements in the county building code. These setbacks are arguably over-conservative and prevent roof-mounted systems from being used on smaller homes, including affordable housing. I said that the change I made and adding of a sentence said the code setbacks are arguably over-conservative and restrict roof-mounted solar systems from being used on smaller homes, including affordable housing. And the sentence I inserted, this can make solar installations on smaller homes financially less attractive. So I think that is acceptable to the task force members. On page 20, I believe there was another change I made. There it is. Looks like a stylistic change. Let's see if I can remember this. I just deleted the word. It says in the first sentence, community solar projects are much smaller. I deleted much. It just reads smaller in size and scope. I believe there are all the changes I had in the document. And let me note, Les. I did not read the entire document for some stylistic changes, and I didn't get through all of it, but I hope to. And I think, but it all reads quite well up until this point, and I don't expect any further changes in this from my side. That said, I think the one thing that you did add that was, I think, substantive from the last time we met is we discussed inserting these maps to help guide the commissioners and help understand what we're looking at. Of course, the commissioners will have available to them, I think, they'll have all the GIS in full available to them. But if you might just sort of walk through these, again, I'd invite Harry to mention anything that he thinks is relevant here to guide us through these maps that were inserted.
Certainly. So if you turn to page 25 of the report, you'll see the first map, and I did work with Mr. Knight, who basically selected these maps and put them in and provided a source with them. This first, I did try to resize them a little bit and also sharpen them up as much as I could from the original source. The first map is under the Navy development issues, and this just shows the areas of concern as put forth by the Navy, and that highlights both the Pax River Station as well as Webster Field, and also the 4 theodolites. So this visually shows what the recommendation text of the radius of concern for the Navy, where the task force is urging a developer, you have to consult with the Navy, and they may require some additional studies, which is described above. I footnoted the source here, so if any person wants to go and actually look at the maps online and look at the mapping app, that's in the endnotes, and they can select that link, and I tested it out and I know it works.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And this was something that, as you point out, in our recommendations, it suggests that these are areas of concern, and if a developer, we did not explicitly say in this report that a developer could not develop a solar in these areas, but that if they do, they're to consult the Navy as soon as possible.
Next, if you turn to page 28, this is the map that shows the preferred areas section based on the criteria listed right above. And this is the ideal areas for solar development, particularly this is addressing utility scale solar. Again, this is not restrictive of being able to go in other areas that are not highlighted on this map, but these are the ideal preferred areas, trying to take into account as well connection ranges of a mile or less and so forth, as well as highlighting where there are brownfield sites, voluntary cleanup program restoration sites, etc. So this kind of highlights this is the best areas for utility scale solar. Turning to page 29, you're in the protected areas, and this highlights the areas that would get additional scrutiny. Again, they're not necessarily completely off limits. If it's a rural legacy area, which is highlighted here, then it's noted earlier in the report that state law does basically trump there, and they have their own requirements on what you can and cannot do with solar within those areas. But the other areas highlighted on this map would basically receive some additional scrutiny. And again, those areas are listed right above.
Are there may I ask, are there state parks also on this one, do you know?
Yes, they don't show up very boldly. So if we were to go back to the first category, so I'm going to back up a few pages. Areas with no or limited county jurisdiction. We've got the federal lands, the Navy bases,
Correct.
the state lands and parks, and the rural legacy is mentioned here, and the town of Leonardtown. So those show up on all of the maps. So getting back to this preferred area,
Yeah.
the federal land shows, Pax River is the easiest one to see here, shown in gray. The state parks are this green patch. So I didn't try to create a map that highlighted those, but also I would point out on this one. So it was very easy to turn on the county-owned land because we had created a layer called county-owned land. It was easy to turn on the public school land. We had created a layer saying public school land. The voluntary cleanup programs are the dark green triangles. So they don't show the mass of the land, they just show a site-specific area. The brownfield sites were a layer that the Chesapeake Conservancy created for us, so that one turns on. The parking lots or similar gray fields were also in that layer, so they come on. The industrial zones is not an independent layer that we created, so I could not turn that on. Those industrial zones that we have in St. Mary's County would show up rather small compared to the other, compared to the dark green triangles you have here. So you can't see them on this map. If the task force is comfortable with that, they certainly are available on other zoning maps, or if the task force is insistent that you want to see them on this map, I can work with IT to have that enhanced.
So I think, allow me, thank you for that explanation, and allow me to comment on that. One of the things I think we discussed a bit is that trying to put these maps in this report and the different layers it's difficult to see in print. And so it, in a sense, makes more sense to go through these, perhaps even online, but it gives a sense of where they are in this report. But for the kind of granularity that perhaps commissioners need or others need, it's really the maps, the GIS maps themselves and the layers that we should refer to. Is that your sense, both of you, that these won't print up very well, and therefore perhaps the idea of putting them in, it'll just be difficult to see all these different layers. Les, do you have any comments on that?
So I did spend some time trying to format these and using sharpen filters and some other things to sharpen them up. And I would agree that I think you can only go so much detail. The maps, having them in a broad sense as being broadly illustrative is good, but that's why I think it's important to have the link in there to go directly to the application, because there you can drill down and yeah.
Very good. Do the task force members have any recommendations here on these maps and how they appear in the report?
No recommendations. I like the way they're in there, as Les was speaking to them being illustrative. Perhaps if we do get called before the commissioners, we can walk them through the maps and the different layers and show them exactly what it looks like.
Yeah, if you can't really show the details, then it makes sense to make them illustrative, Right.
Yeah, most of
As we've done.
the real detail won't become apparent till you zoom in on a closer look at the county.
Yes.
So a similar thing I did with the protected area is because of the protected areas, the Navy base, the state parks, the town of Leonardtown boundary are not bold on the map, but the rural legacy is able to be bolded here. And so I took the liberty, even though it wasn't named in the list above, I took the liberty of including it in this map. So yeah, I would, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but during the task force discussions, you had recommended that we not adopt maps as part of the report. And so the report names criteria. And so I would definitely characterize that these maps are just illustrations for, really, like Les had described before, to help the formatting of the report and, add a little bit of color as you go through. But it's the text of the report that is the Solar Task Force recommendation.
That's right. The maps will change depending on who puts what layer on which map.
Yes.
And I didn't want these maps to become set in stone and everyone think, okay, here's exactly it, and get fooled by it.
Yes. And our department agrees. We are not planning as we move forward to adopt special solar layer maps.
Yeah, and right. So the report really does contain our description of each of these areas where we think solar is, where there's no authority for the state or for the county,
Yeah.
where we would preferred areas and then allowable areas as well. So
Yeah.
all that is described in the report, and there are maps that illustrate those each of those categories. The areas with no or limited jurisdiction, the preferred areas, the protected areas, right, and then allowed areas. So all that's described in the report, but I want to be sure that the task force, I do think having these maps, even they are illustrative, they're still helpful for the county commissioners to look through, and then they can always ask for more detail on these maps.
I'll even, now that I'm looking at it, the last one that I took the liberty to not turn on is on this map, the protected areas. Recommendation area number 4, wetlands. If I turned that layer on, they heavily populated the county so that suddenly you kind of lost focus on the other areas. So I turned wetlands off. There's just too many of them.
Understood.
It clutters the map.
Understood. And that's what we found. And then even when we put them all together at different times when we were discussing it, it was difficult to really make out. So that'll be something for the commissioners to sort out to some degree and be instructed on, and perhaps to the degree that, when we present this to the commissioners, we can provide them with some guidance on how we saw it, as well as they can look at these maps for themselves and decide what they think is obviously the best zoning decisions to make.
Mr. Chairman, I could offer a small suggestion, maybe at the bottom of each map with the source, after the end, where we're crediting the GIS manager, just put in parentheses, for illustrative purposes only.
I would second that, and I certainly believe that that's a beneficial to the report.
Then the last category, much like the first, allowed areas, is everything else. And so I didn't try to create a map of everything else.
That's correct. That's correct. So thank you for that, and understood on that. There are the maps. We have, I think, all of the recommendations in there. I want to note, just again for the record, that both the principles and recommendations were all voted on by this committee, and the wording provided by task force members. So the only thing, in some ways, added to this report were from the last time, were these maps, just some pictures, formatting, and a few sentences about the context for the recommendations as we went on. So I don't have any more anything else to add here. A note that there was recommendations to put some things in the appendix, so we now have, is it 4 appendices less?
Yes.
And so much of that is,
5.
Yep, and much of that is the same, including the endnotes that maybe some things changed there. But other than that, I have nothing to add here in terms of the content of this report, and want to just turn it over to task force members to make any comments they have.
Yeah, I have no comments.
No further comments?
Well, with that, Les, do you have anything you'd like to add on the report that that you've either noticed since you produced it or have a recommendation on?
So basically, I made two very small spelling/grammar corrections based on some input from Sandy. And other than that, no, I appreciate the task force's feedback in this. I hope you're happy with it. With the additional proposed 6 stylistic changes that were discussed today, I would submit the report for recommendation.
So I would move that we accept this report as the final report, subject to small revisions, and would ask that the task force authorize me to work with the consultant to make those small revisions. If I feel there's anything substantive, I will share that with the committee.
Second that.
All those in favor of approval of this final report?
Aye.
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 All those against? No nays? So I think our work here is at least just about completed with some of the small, maybe potentially some small changes. With that, I really just want to first take a point of personal privilege to thank the task force members for their dedication and contributions for this final report. I know I've benefited, and all of us have benefited from, I think, from each other's counsel on this and trying to provide a strong product. I want to thank, of course, all the staff for their help in developing this. You worked seamlessly with the task force, and I very much appreciate that. And I also want to commend Les Knapp for his efforts throughout, not only guiding our thinking here and providing a variety of different suggestions, but also really helping us understand some issues from the perspective of someone who has worked with many, many counties. So I feel proud of this report. I think the report identifies and provides rationale for zoning recommendations across those 4 categories. I think it gives the commissioners a lot to work with. There's no such thing as a perfect task force report, but there is a strong task force report with very clear recommendations to the commissioners. So with that, I'll just say thank you to everyone and then hand it over to my fellow committee task force members.
All right, I guess I'll take it from there. Want to echo Dr. Kane's sentiments there and also add all this was accomplished during a pandemic. So let's not forget that everyone continued to work and work diligently to get this done during those timeframes, which was added just a little bit different layer of complexity that we hadn't experienced before. So but I think it in ways made us a little more efficient. We had to stay a little focused on certain items that we had to get done. So thanks to everyone for that. Thanks to staff and thanks to Dr. Kane and his guidance.
Thank you very much, Jeff, and I agree with you on that. The pandemic did add some difficulty and potentially added at least a couple months to our report. Over to you, Mr. Thompson.
All right, I've got a little bit longer
Sure.
since I'm the oldest one in the room. So a long time ago, all my interest in solar and energy and so forth started with a degree in physics with a lot of emphasis on energy. In 1973, I was working for AT&T, DC telephone company, and we were held hostage by the Arab oil embargo. I think some of us remember that. It's a terrible situation when someone holds you hostage and you are helpless. In response, AT&T initiated an energy conservation program that I worked on in many buildings in and around DC. The result was we saved a lot of energy, all based on financial study and taking advantage of the most fruitful opportunities. Saving was not enough, but it relieves being held hostage. Soon America was using more energy and buying just as much. So Barbara and I built our home in 1981 and took advantage of that then initiated solar tax credit. In 2007, that system was worn out. It was a water system, no electricity. So in 2007, that system was worn out and replaced it in 2009 with our first of 4 progressive solar installations. Each of these installations was financially rewarding. As a culture, we as a nation continue to use more and more energy. Fortunately, as a nation, we have taken advantage of cleaner sources of energy. Almost all energy-consuming technologies are much more efficient these days, from light bulbs to AC units. As one who worked in and around DC for quite some time, the air is significantly cleaner in that area for those coming behind us. Still not enough. We need our current energy power generation plants and a robust grid. We can supplement that with now cheaper and cleaner solar and wind. This task force and what we implement afterwards is a significant part of this apparently necessary progress. I've always been a great admirer of the simpleness of St. Francis and thankful for my Catholic training to be a responsible steward of this world and its resources. It is most fruitful when we can spend our time and energy more wisely and have it be financially rewarding. I am comfortable that we have a path for all this to come together. Solar is not the complete answer, but a significant part of the answer. We all have a part to play. So I am very grateful that I could be on this committee. I thank everyone who helped.
Thank you, Mike. This is, I agree with those sentiments, and I think all of us on this committee want to see clean energy in our county and want to continue. I think our work won't be done with this task force. We'll be continuing to work together off this task force to talk about these matters and to try to continue to promote energy efficiency, which is a different task force, I suppose, one of these days, but certainly solar energy being clean energy. Les Knapp, you've been working since even prior to the maybe in a task force forming. Would you like to say anything?
So I don't have any prepared remarks, but just very shortly, I have served both as staff and as a member of many task forces and commissions at the state level and the local level throughout my tenure here in Maryland. I'm always appreciative of a group that can come together with different perspectives and viewpoints, as I believe this task force had, and come out with what I believe is a very concrete and rational product that is designed to help not only the elected officials of St. Mary's County, but most importantly, its residents and citizens. So I hope that this report has that. I'm very proud to have been part of this process. So thank you for allowing me that honor.
Great, and yes, and I think all the committee members would echo my sentiment that we really benefited from your suggestions and advice. And I also want to thank Harry for helping us. I think one of the Mr. Knight, you really helped us understand zoning in a way that I know I did not understand prior to this this task force. So that really helped us, I think, focus our effort to get some concrete suggestions in there. So I want to thank you for that. And of course, you, Sandy, you've been here with us and helping us get through in an efficient way. And that was especially difficult, I know, through during this pandemic. So I thank you for that. With that, unless there's any final comments by the task force members, I'll move to adjourn.
So moved.
Without objection, then, let's adjourn this task force, and I look forward to speaking with the commissioners at some future point to help them understand what the task force came up with and how some of the reasoning that we had behind these recommendations. So thank you all very much.